Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. This is an amazing episode because Brandon Thomas returns to the mothership to discuss Black Lightning from DC Comics. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Thomas. Thank you for coming back to the Versus Stars podcast.
Hey, what's up, man? How are you? How you
I'm doing very
been?
well. How about yourself, sir? It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, I'm happy to be back.
Well, like I said, I think the last time we spoke humanoids, or publisher of humanoids, and now we're talking Black Lightning from DC
Yep.
Comics. So how do you get involved with the series?
Well, it was something that I worked on with the editor of the series, Marquise Draper. We've worked together several times in the past at DC. He was on the Aquaman, some of the Aquaman stuff that I did, the hardware book that I did for the Milestone revival, and this was kind of a pitch that was, being kind of nursed along for several months, and we got a good opening with the kind of aftermath of Absolute Power with the DC All In initiative, and so we basically got drafted into service, and so this book ended up coming out of the aftermath of Absolute Power, and it was a really good. It was one of those like good windows where DC was ready to launch like a bunch of new stuff. So I was happy to be able to bring this Black Lightning book to that.
Now, Black Lightning's had a great history. I kind of feel like he had a resurgence of popularity coming out of the TV show.
Oh,
I
definitely.
think that was really awesome, and I think it was a very one of the stronger CW shows that they came out with.
Yes.
So when you think about Black,
Arrowverse, RIP.
yeah, yeah. When you think about Black Lightning as a character, and honestly, created by Tony Isabella, I believe, back some
Yes.
years ago.
Yeah, and Trevor Von Eaton. I believe it's a co-creation, so I'm not sure. We might need to check on that, but I think so.
We'll check. We'll have the show notes check in on it.
Yeah.
Where do you see as like what intrigues you most about the character? Where did you see the untapped potential of the character?
Oh, well, to me it was very very much his family, and kind of like his status within the DCU and now within the Justice League, because he's one of the kind of front facing members of Justice League Unlimited. So it was a really good opportunity to get back into his kind of circle, and the characters making up his world, and do something that I hope is pretty cool and pushes them forward and positions them to be in a much more kind of prominent position in the DCU. But for me, it's all about his family. It's about a father trying to raise two superpowered children, and deal with the kind of the weight of a lot of responsibility. He has a lot of responsibility always heaped on his shoulders, and he carries so much. And so our story delves into what happens when he feels like he's failed one of his children, and kind of what that does to him and what that does to the kind of family unit and the family dynamics at play.
Now, I think it's very interesting to kind of frame it as not only a super but a father, obviously, to Lightning and Thunder. Um, I find it interesting that fighting alongside his children. Is that a conflict of interest for him? Is there a question of is it the citizens, the mission, or the children that comes first in any time there's a danger?
Absolutely, that's something we deal with in the book, with his relationship with his eldest daughter Anissa, in the wake of Absolute Power. After Amanda Waller took everyone's powers away, and everyone gets restored, there was an opening there where everyone's powers weren't coming back to them in the kind of same way that they left. Some characters got different powers, some had augmented abilities, and in the case of Anissa, her powers came back augmented and enhanced and out of her control. So that's a big thing that's happening in the relationship between Anissa and Jefferson, where she is holding a lot of kind of resentment surrounding her father and all of these responsibilities that he's taken on that are not about her and not about the family. So that's definitely something that we really, really dive into in the series. Just like that exact question, like what kind of choices is Jefferson forced to make, when he has a responsibility to his family, he has a responsibility to his community, and now a kind of elevated responsibility to the Justice League that he didn't have. He's had it before, but this is a different. It's basically it's a different DCU, like in the wake of Absolute Power, and we just wanted to kind of dig in there and kind of dig into, um, what does it mean when the villain of the story does something that a lot of people living in this universe actually agree with, and that there is a lot of kind of hesitancy and fear and anxiety, for a world that's kind of filling up with these, enhanced people and the kind of damage and destruction they can bring. So definitely something we're tapping into in the story.
Yeah, it feels sort of, you can definitely look at it from a point of view of nature, nurture versus nature, or nature versus nurture, because Lightning feels like she has adapted very well to the world of being a superhero. She
Mm-hmm.
embraces it. She embraces her father's role as a superhero as well, while Thunder, it's definitely not. Does Thunder have a more legitimate gripe than Lightning does?
I think there's a couple of different things that I was thinking about. The first thing that that made a lot of sense to me is that Black Lightning and his youngest daughter Lightning have the essentially the same power set, and I think in the family dynamic that has given them a relationship that feels a lot different and a little closer than the relationship that he has with Anissa. And I think if you would ask her, that would be one of her kind of personal gripes, that she feels that he has a much more natural kind of connection and affinity to her younger sister because their powers are the same. She is the youngest, so she still has that kind of hero worship when it comes to her father. She is kind of always looking up to him, and it's kind of like, he can do no wrong. He's like the perfect dad, the perfect superhero. And Anissa has a slightly different experience with him in the fact that when her powers first emerged, he wasn't, I don't want to say he wasn't supportive, but he wasn't thrilled about the idea of his oldest, getting into the family business, as it
Mhm.
were. And I think if you ask Anissa, she would say that she had to go through a lot more with him in order to kind of help him accept her in this kind of role that her younger sister didn't have to do. So she kind of feels like she kind of took all of the kind of emotional bullets, from this kind of very serious question about, what, like, being a superhero is dangerous.
Mhm.
Like it's not all kind of fun and games. And so she really feels that she kind of absorbed that and took a lot of, not abuse, but she took a lot of resistance that she had to kind of push past, that her sister kind of really kind of just skated by. And they have the same powers, and it's a really kind of complicated, like, emotional knot that we're really trying to dig in between these three very distinct characters. So
Now, in the mind of Black Lightning, is the bigger concern the danger that you mentioned, or is it the lifestyle? Because if you're a superhero, as we know from almost most superheroes, balancing a life and doing what they do is extremely difficult. Is it the danger that's more concerning, or the fact that the lifestyle is more concerning?
I mean, I think it's all, it's all concerning. I think for him, he has, when you kind of examine him and his history in comparison to other superheroes,
Mhm.
his history is not, I mean, there is kind of tragedy in his history, but there are, you know, there are superheroes that are like defined by these kind of deep, like, punishing tragedies. Batman is a great example. if we want to step across the street, Daredevil has like a history that is kind of steeped in tragedy and loss and violence that Black Lightning necessarily hasn't experienced. So I think for him, it's probably more the not the lifestyle. It's probably more the danger of it. And I think there's also an interesting dynamic at play where their mother doesn't have powers, and I feel like that is another kind of twist, kind of like corkscrew for him emotionally, where it makes him feel. I mean, he already has the kind of inherent responsibility of being a father, especially to young women, young Black women specifically. But I think it's also the fact that his now ex-wife doesn't have power, so he feels like even more pressure and responsibility to try to shield them and shield her from kind of like the fallout and the shrapnel that can come from putting on a costume and going and getting into fights with
Hmm.
very dangerous fights with dangerous people. So it's all it's all like this really kind of complicated ball of kind of like emotional kind of angst and responsibility and commitment, and so all those fun things. So lot of stuff to work with on this book.
Well, like I said, and you mentioned something else that's kind of impactful is that the Justice League is now Justice League Unlimited, much like the cartoon
Yep.
Justice League Limited, where every superhero is part of the team, but there's
Yes.
still teams that exist within the team.
Hmm.
Like say we have Power Company, some others will come up. How does that, how does like not only Black Lightning but Lightning exist in this world now where everyone's a member of the Justice League, everyone is technically on call. There's still
Hmm.
these units within units on the teams as well. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, there's something that I played on very briefly. There's a scene in the most recently released issue 3, where it's essentially like Lightning on a Zoom call with other young superheroes. So I wanted to kind of put that kind of dynamic into her, kind of like into her kind of understanding and embrace of being, a young superhero. And it just made sense to me if you had all of these like, like late teens, early 20 something heroes, that they would periodically get together and talk and, tell stories, maybe, talk about things that are bothering them, or things about the kind of lifestyle that kind of scares them, or that they don't like, or that they need kind of help or counsel with. So I think in regards to her, she is really kind of embraced this role, and she is Black Lightning kind of has this own like intervention squad that he's doing in addition to his Justice League responsibilities, that kind of goes out and kind of has when new metahumans powers activate and they kind of get into situations, he and his daughter Lightning will show up and kind of help them through this process of, I have powers now. What does that mean for my life and my job and my family? And so she has really embraced her role as essentially kind of his partner, his assistant, on these kind of like little missions they get to go on and like meet and encounter new people that are trying to deal with the kind of wreckage that having powers can bring to your life. And I really think she has, she doesn't like everything about it, but she likes a lot about it. And I think that she really admires and idolizes her father. And this is kind of like something that they have, something else that they can share. That's kind of just the two of them. Like when the series starts, Anissa is not a part of this kind of intervention team because she is keeping secrets and hiding a very important kind of revelation from her family that gets exposed very early on in the series. So,
Now, usually when I think about Black Lightning, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, he's usually
mhm.
viewed as a street level hero.
Hmm.
The Justice League deals with a scope now, especially with that Justice League Limited, that's massive. How
Yes.
does that increase scope and responsibility now, where they're dealing with potentially, if they're on call, world level, maybe even universal level threats? How does
Hmm.
Black Lightning view that? How does he view that in terms of his daughter potentially getting a call, being like, "Hey, we now have a
Time to go out in
threat."
space.
Right, right. We have a threat that's now massively more dangerous than what you're dealing with right now. I mean, how does that impact their view of what they do and what their own responsibilities are?
I think for Jefferson, it really kind of turns the pressure up. It turns the pressure up. It turns the level of responsibility way up at a time when, it might not be the best thing for him or his family. And that was something I really wanted to bring to the series. I did want to elevate and escalate the scope of the threats that they were kind of facing. And there's a reason why in the first issue, there's a scene that takes place on the watchtower. There is a really cool scene between him and Superman, kind of like in the monitor room. And I really wanted to kind of stretch the character out, like not take him away from his core or take him away from the community. And now Southside Heights is its term now. It used to be Suicide Slum, but they've gone through a public rebranding, public gentrifying. So they are now Southside Heights. So I didn't want to take him completely away from that through the entire story. And people will see that as the story evolves, it kind of returns back to kind of his kind of core and his roots. But when we started out, I really wanted to make a point of, having him, flying through Metropolis and Hobbs Bay, and there's like a giant monster, and there's like a T-Rex, in the series. I don't want to tell you where, but there's a T-Rex in the series, and I did want to contribute some situations that we don't usually see Black Lightning in, and we don't typically associate with him, just to kind of stretch the character out a little bit and to show how different things are in his life, and to really put the question to him, like, what's more important? Is it what's going on kind of like in my community, in my neighborhood, or is it what's going on in space? And how do we kind of make the choice between the two, and what happens when the space stuff is taking away from the community stuff and the family stuff? So that is really a central question that we're dealing with. But to me personally, I don't like, I don't like how kind of locked in a lot of the black and brown superheroes tend to be. Like, I don't like, kind of Black Lightning and Luke Cage kind of like confined to like a block or a neighborhood, or like, I'm going to protect these 3 blocks and that's all I care about. So, to me personally, it was always important to really kind of show how much he has going on and how many different environments that he is now operating in, and that his world is just getting larger and larger. Like, the longer he's, kind of like an active superhero, the scope and the scale of his existence is increasing. And then what happens when his children and his family are kind of like injected into that, and how big is too big, how epic is too epic. So, you know definitely dealing with that
Well, I
quite a
think
bit.
it's interesting that you're pointing that out because when you think of like Power Man, you think of Black Lightning. Their power sets are pretty immense right now. Like Power Man has gone to toe with some very heavy hitters. Black Lightning is
Hmm.
immensely powerful, but as you said, they're still considered street level
Right.
heroes, which is a very weird thing to box a stick 'em in.
Well, it's code, in a way, unfortunately. So, it's kind of one of those things that can't that can't be entirely avoided. But I always I always try to consider that my job is to come in and decide that, like, what I want to focus on. That's always part of the pitch. Like, what am I going to focus on? Like, I know that he is kind of known and considered and understood as like a street level hero, but that doesn't have to define kind of what I think about him or what kind of stories I want to tell about him. To me, I just want to make that's one kind of part of his existence and one part of his character and part of his history, but that's not all he is, and that's not all he's ever going to be. So, my job is to find the thing that, try to find something that I haven't seen or I haven't seen enough of, and kind of really like highlight that so that if I get to tell more stories with him and his family, this is what he is now. He's not just like a street level character now. And then if someone else comes after me, he's not just this. He's more. And so that's just kind of my kind of responsibility at this time to find the more and kind of embrace and spotlight that to give him kind of like a larger platform to work on.
Well, and the interesting about Black Lightning right now is that because he does have a daughter who can
Mm-hmm.
become a successful hero in her own right, is there a
Mm-hmm.
point where he can trust his daughter to take the street level, as it were, and move beyond it on his own? Like, can he trust her and be like, "This is now your territory, and I move on"? And how long would that take, you think, to earn that trust?
Yeah, I think there is, I think there is a situation. I'm trying not to spoil.
Okay.
You're like dancing on the end of the story a little bit, but I do think that there is that he can see a day where maybe something that I always think about in regards to him is his kind of destiny just to be like, a superhero, like put on the costume, fight people, be an example, whatever, whatever. I could definitely see a day where he takes on a different role, like he could, be in local politics. I mean, he's already spent some time in Lex Luthor, President Luthor's cabinet. So, there could be kind of like I could definitely see like a larger stage for him where he kind of left the kind of day to day, fisticuffs of superheroing behind and took on a new kind of like a new role that embraced, embraces more of his history as kind of like an educator and a teacher and someone who really cares about young people and wants to kind of mentor them and kind of help them kind of stay on the right path and make the right choices.
Now, there's a quote I want to read from issue 3, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a quote. It's in the third issue. It says,
Mm-hmm.
"These metas, including Black Lightning, deny us the pride of our own strength, the agency over our own lives." Now, does this hold true for the heroes as well as the villains? Is simply being a meta a crime against ordinary people based on that statement?
I think what I'm first of all, this is a quote from an awful character that I do enjoy writing called Jay Harriman. He's a Metropolis councilman. He's actually an older, well, I don't know if I should say too much, but he's actually from an older run of Superman comics. I don't know if anyone remembers the Superman books like right before the Triangle era
Okay.
started. Jerry Ordway was doing a lot of can't remember if he was on Adventures or the main Superman book, but the Sons of Liberty, which is a big kind of paramilitary slash advocacy group that's featured in this story. He was a high ranking member of that group. And so we've kind of rebranded him. Now he's a Metropolis councilman that's kind of not in conflict, but he's trying to set himself as up against kind of like Mayor White and how Mayor White views heroes. And I think one of the things that we're trying to express through his character is just this distrust of metahumans that is kind of building in the DC universe. And I think for a lot of people, making the distinction between heroes and villains doesn't really mean anything. I mean, I think to a lot of people in this kind of perspective, looking at things from this perspective, sometimes the heroes are just as dangerous as the villains are. And if a building falls, on you, while you're trying to, make your way home from work or something, do you really care if like a hero or a villain is the one that's responsible? And I think that's what we're kind of playing at, just the and other stories and kind of superhero spaces have dealt with this, but something that I always think about is like, what would that do? I mean, it's kind of like the Lex Luthor argument. Like Lex Luthor makes this argument, a lot, and it's a compelling one. Where what does what do regular people do, like in a world where Superman exists, to basically not solve all of your problems, but to handle these kind of impossible, unsolvable, you know, just unimaginable kind of threats and questions. Like, does humanity aspire and ascend in the way they naturally would, with, someone like that flying around, where you can look up in the sky and, and Superman is there. It's like, oh, well, Superman will take care of it. He'll fix it, and so it's really kind of delving into that idea and that perspective that people people with these abilities existing in this world have changed this world fundamentally, and not just like physically, just their presence has changed normal people emotionally in a way that is difficult to kind of quantify and kind of see and point to. But it's really kind of playing with that idea of, it's really nice and it's super cool that there's a Justice League to kind of show up and beat back Darkseid and Brainiac. But would there even be like a Darkseid and a Brainiac if it wasn't for them? Like if they weren't kind of standing in opposition? And it's a very kind of, it's a kind of well-worn argument, but we are trying to dive into it kind of in this very specific focus point to really, um, kind of jump into into that kind of quagmire and kind of really dig into those questions and really play with this idea, like, not everyone is as perfect and altruistic as Jefferson Pierce is. Not everyone who gets these powers is also used to be like a school principal or a teacher.
Yeah.
Like, and so a lot of people are just, they're not equipped to handle the kind of the pressures and the stresses. And that's part of what Black Lightning is doing with his kind of intervention squad. He's kind of trying to insert himself into people's lives and kind of make a difference and kind of show them, that this doesn't have to like irrevocably kind of like ruin your life, or you don't have to. Your first instinct when you get these powers shouldn't be like, what can I now take from the world or take from other people? So, there's a reason that the story is called, The Standard, which is a bit of a Mike Tomlin reference for any like football fans out there. But for a lot of superheroes, Black Lightning is kind of the standard. He's like, not all the time does the right thing, but he mostly does the right thing. His heart is mostly in the right place. But not everyone is Jefferson Pierce, and what happens when other people are not living up to the standard, and more importantly, what happens to Jefferson Pierce when he feels that he is not living up to his own standard in regards to his family and his community. So that's essentially what the story is about
Well, I was
at
thinking
its
that
core.
quote has some fascinating ramifications because on the one hand, you're looking at Superman, as you mentioned, Black Lightning or anyone who they choose to save. I mean, there's going to be people still dying who weren't saved that time by Superman.
Right.
His choice to either interfere in this area here or that area there, whatever situation he chooses to interfere with. Then you're looking at things like there's like a meme and also a thing like Man of Steel where Superman chooses to pick up your car and smash the villain with it. I mean, Kal says
Right.
you shouldn't use your damn car. This, like he could have used somebody else's, but he chose yours. Didn't ask.
Right.
You just smashed someone with
Right.
it. Usually doesn't do
Yeah.
anything. Man of Steel also, in the movie, like smashing buildings, things are toppling, as you mentioned. Does he have the right to make those choices for the people who now have their livelihoods destroyed? I don't know if the insurance covers Superman or not. I mean,
Right.
if one or
Can
another
you
rate goes
imagine the
up,
premiums? The
right,
premiums in the DC universe must be insane.
right, and the rate goes up every time Superman smashes your car. Even if you get covered, your rate is going to go up. I'm just saying that's not fair. I mean, Batman
Yeah.
pays that shit off. Superman can't afford it. Uh,
Yeah. Definitely.
so I think I mean, it's an interesting question of that he's bringing up. Like, where is our right as individuals or citizens to be like, we don't, you saved the day, stop the bank robber who was stealing $10,000, but you created $10 million in damage to get there. I mean, that's not fair.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a really, it's the question. Like it's the central question in most of these stories. And most of these stories, even if they don't start with this question, they eventually get to that question. There's enough damage and destruction that's done that eventually people start asking, like, do we really need this? Like, or what are we actually getting out of this? Like, we're being saved, but it's just, I mean, imagine the anxiety of someone, having to live like in a superhero universe. I mean,
And
you just think about just regular life and how some just completely out of control and unpredictable it can often be, and inject like us, eject the Justice League into that frame, and you could really see it's like, man, it's like everybody, I hope everybody is and like the mental health like costs of living in like Metropolis and Gotham City must just be like immense.
right,
Like every few months in Gotham, like the Joker has poisoned the water like again, or there's some like balloon that's releasing gas over the city. Like just imagine, like no one would want to live there. Like what is, like, this is the worst.
right. I was watching Spider-Man: Homecoming recently, the movie again, and there's a
Uh-huh.
scene at the beginning where he's stopping these five criminals from breaking into an ATM machine. And during the
Hmm.
fight, it destroys a local restaurant. I mean, it's gone. I think to myself, the the money that they were going to save from the ATM is probably less than the destruction of the restaurant.
Yes.
Maybe just let the guy take the freaking money and save the restaurant. I mean, that was the bigger damage right there. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we love these questions. I mean, I think this is why, these stories are so, why they mean so much to us, because it's great. It's always a great exercise to really kind of like delve into that question from all these different angles. And you can come up with a lot of kind of solutions, and all of them are valid. And there are a few things that that where the situation is that where there's like all of these kind of like right answers. So it's been pretty exciting to kind of for all intents and purposes to kind of twist the screws a little bit on some of the heroes in the wake of this big event. And we wanted to make, it's kind of, I think people are used to books launching in the wake of like big crossovers and big events. So we really wanted to make sure this book was really kind of advancing and continuing like those themes, and what we saw were interesting directions. And poor Anissa became like the kind of vessel for those questions, where it's like, oh, Anissa's powers are like completely out of control and she hasn't told her family, and then what happens when they find out? So you know what happens when the call is coming from inside the house, so to speak.
Well, speaking of danger, there's also the line in the same issue from Batman who tells Black Lightning that he's dangerous.
Yes.
In what context does he mean? Does he mean dangerous to the people that you want Black Lightning to be dangerous to, or is Black Lightning just dangerous, according to
I
Batman?
think to Batman, all of them are dangerous.
Hmm.
I mean, to him, anyone that has powers is dangerous. And I think that we've seen that expressed in a lot of different, amazing, Batman stories. There was the great one that I believe Mark Wade wrote at the Tower of
Oh,
Babel, I
yep.
believe, where Ra's al Ghul got his hands on all of his like secret files. Like this is how I'd take out Aquaman if I had to. So I think in as far as Batman is concerned, they're all dangerous. And I just one of the things I found that was a really kind of interesting and fascinating scene to write. I had to do a couple of different versions of it before it really kind of felt right. And what I found out, I mean, I knew this, but I really know it now. Like if you ever have like any question, like if there's ever any kind of like confrontation or kind of argument that's happening, amongst like the Justice League or the Trinity, here's like a trick that I've learned. It's like just Batman is always the asshole. Like if you just always make him the guy who is like saying the thing that like doesn't need to be said, like it always works. Like I felt like in a couple early versions of that scene, I was putting a little too much of that kind of like vibe onto Superman, and it kind of wasn't working. It wasn't really sticking, and it was, the solution was right there the entire time, Batman. And of course, him and Jefferson already have like a well-established history. They had like, a team that they were kind of sort of running together, but Batman would always, he would always, I don't want to say always, but he would, periodically interfere with the way the team was being run. And so there's a little something always happening between him and Black Lightning. So in that kind of, in that situation where they're essentially kind of arguing about his daughter and kind of, the way to respond to these kind of problems and issues that she's having, it made like 1,000%, it worked 1,000% kind of making him the guy that is like, well, I mean, she's dangerous and like, and so are you. So, it just, I love writing him. I get to write him in like kind of like fits and starts. Like I've done like a couple of like short stories, or he like makes like guest appearances and things that I've written before, and it's always great. And my kind of model for him is always like Batman the animated series. Like it's always like Kevin Conroy forever. And anytime you're writing Batman, and anytime you write it, you're just like, it should be less. Like it should be like less dialogue, less spoken. Like the line should just be, it should just be surgical. Like everyone else is kind of going, even in that scene, like everyone else is kind of going like on and on, like Jefferson and Superman and Wonder Woman, and they're really trying to, um, they're really trying to convince, Jefferson that maybe we've kind of overstepped a little in the situation, but this is why we did it. And we're really trying to help you. And we're not trying to cross that line, but we do, we want you and we want her to be safe and we want this all to work out. And then Batman just comes in and with like two short lines, he just kind of blows up like the whole thing. And so it was one of the, I think one of the kind of like funnest and kind of most entertaining kind of scenes that I've gotten to write while I've worked for DC. And it was so important to that particular issue that I wrote that scene first. So like the back half of that issue, I guess it was like maybe pages 14 to 20, like all of that was written. Like it was the very first chunk of script that got kind of like installed into the script because I felt how important it was, and I wanted to get that scene into a place where I really liked it before I touched anything else. Because sometimes when you leave like the big important thing, you can't stop thinking about the big important thing while you're writing the other important things.
Yeah.
And so I know for me personally, if there's like a big scene, if there's like the most important scene, I will typically write that first and try to get that into basically into shape, like into a version of it that I really, really like. so that I can move on to other things, so that I'm not, being stalked by like, you got to write that Batman scene, So,
So, what is next for Black Lightning? Is this going to be ongoing miniseries?
right now it's a mini series. I guess there's a possibility that we could do more, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen, and I'm not sure about the scheduling on that. But I have written and submitted kind of a like a what comes next, document. So, obviously I have like if I got to tell more stories, I'd, have a, an even bigger plan, an even bigger story, like even bigger stakes. So we'll see. So if people, we've been getting pretty good reviews and a really great response to it, and I think that I think that with him being in Justice League Unlimited, this is a really good opportunity to really like drive the point home that like Jefferson Pierce and his place in this kind of new world is important. And hopefully, I'll get the opportunity to tell more stories with him and his family down the road. And I am definitely ready for it. If I get tapped on the shoulder, if they tell me they want more, like I have a lot more always. So
Well, you also wrote in DC Power, Rise of the Power Company, a prelude story called Company Man.
yeah.
Can you kind of dive into a little bit of that story and kind of what should readers expect from this Josiah Power?
Well, that is when we were working on Black Lightning, we were also having a conversation about me and my editor, Marquise Draper. We're also having a conversation, very long conversation about Power Company and ideas to bring it back, and if it's brought back, like what does it mean? Like what kind of mission statement will they kind of be after? Like what will the point be? Like, why is now the time to bring them back in a new form? And so we decided to kind of, I don't want to say that the Black Lightning series is like a prequel to Power Company, but both series are kind of touching each other. The first time we see Josiah Power for the first time in a long time is in the third issue of Black Lightning. And so the story kind of starts there and then continues in the DC Power special where I write the framing story. So I'm basically giving like it's kind of like a primer on Josiah Power and kind of what he's doing, why he's back, and why he's re-engaging into this new world. And then he will also make another appearance later on in the Black Lightning story, but I can't tell you where because it's like super important. So we wanted to take that opportunity to kind of bring him back and kind of like get him on screen and kind of see like what he's kind of about like emotionally at this kind of specific point in time. And then the work that we did in DC Power like continues that story. Like, why is he putting together this new power company, and why is he so desperate for Jefferson Pierce to be a part of it? And what does he do? Like when Jefferson turns him down, like what happens there, and then that will continue directly into a one shot that Brian Hill is writing with art from Kari Randolph. I did an amazing series with Kari called Excellence, which led to a lot of this DC work that I've been doing for the last several years. And Aletha Martinez, I believe, is also drawing part of it too. So that'll be pretty cool and exciting. And then based on the response, we'll see what happens with that, what happens with Black Lightning, what happens with Power Company. I mean, I can easily see like a universe where those are kind of like sister titles that are kind of like playing off each other or communicating with each other in a cool way. So we'll see, but it's it's an exciting time, and I think bringing back Power Company is a natural extension of what DC has been doing the last few years when they've been putting out, these DC Power specials during February every year. So I'm really seeing what's happening with Power Company as an extension of that. So we'll see what form that takes, when it's time to do DC Power next year. So, it's pretty exciting. But I'm just, I'm glad to be involved in it. And I'm glad, so many like great and talented creators like Brian Hill and John Jennings and Vita Ayala, we're getting to kind of really, like contribute to this thing that's being built. So it's super exciting.
Well, like I said, I mean, I hope Black Lightning continues. When does DC Power Rise of the Power Company come out? Do you know?
That came out last week. I
Last
believe
week.
it came
Okay.
out last Wednesday. And the one shot I believe is coming out in April, and I think you can pre-order that now. I think we're taking pre-orders for that right now. And the Black Lightning series will also have a trade collection that's coming. I'm not sure. Hopefully, sometime in the spring or early summer. So we'll get all 5 issues collected up with some. I'm trying to work a couple of extras in there. I've done a lot of cool like 10 pagers for DC over the years, so I'm trying to see if I can get a couple of those put into this one as well. So
And then the volume two, obviously, for Black Lightning, right?
hopefully, volume 2, 3, 4. Let's keep going. So they know I'm ready for it.
So yeah, DC Power, Black Lightning, and Volume Two coming out. I'm just going to throw that into the world, just make it happen. And
Yeah.
what's next for you?
Well, there's a couple of pitches in at DC that I'm really hoping I can get a green light on in these next few months. A couple of really big and kind of vital. Well, to me, it feels all very big and very vital. So hopefully more to come. Hopefully
And,
more DC work to come, and I'll be finishing up Excellence. At least this kind of this particular story. I don't want to say I'm finishing, but so I'll be. I'm always around, so
can you
I'm
hint
always
at
popping up.
can you hint at any of the projects that you're throwing out to DC or any other company that you can maybe?
Not that I can talk about, but
Okay.
I always try to do a mix. I always, try to do things for, DC, Marvel, other companies, and there's always some creator-owned things that I'm cooking up. So there's a couple of new or returning creator-owned things in addition to Excellence that I'm trying to get stood up and ready to get back out there. So
Well, anytime you want to come back on the show, you're always welcome to. Thank you so much.
thank
Let's
you.
keep Black Lightning going.
All right, let's keep it going. I'm ready.
Have a great night, sir.
You too. Thank you. Peace.